Welcome to this special edition of the New Stack Makers on the Road. We're here in KubeCon North America in
Detroit Rock City!
Discussions from the show floor with technologists giving you their expertise and insights to help you with your everyday work. KubeCon and CloudNativeCon conferences gather adopters and technologists to further the education and advancement of cloud-native computing. The vendor-neutral events feature domain experts and key maintainers behind popular projects like Kubernetes, Prometheus, Envoy, Core DNS, Containered, and more.
Hi, it's B. Cameron Gain, correspondent with the New Stack here in beautiful downtown Detroit. I really love this city. And I'm here today with Austin Parker, head of developer relations at Lightstep. Thanks for joining us today, Austin.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And I'm here also with Morgan McClean, director of product management at Splunk.
Wonderful to be here.
I'm glad to have you here because I'm really interested in observability and OpenTelemetry. And for our viewers and listeners, how do you describe this context? Or could you please just put observability today, this conjuncture in time, and how does OpenTelemetry fit into that, please?
It's funny because we were just talking about this before we came on, and the way I described it, right, is that if you think about Kubernetes has really been transformative to developers and operators because it standardizes a lot of the conventions and APIs and ways that we think about scaling and deploying cloud-native software. OpenTelemetry solves that for observability because if you want to have observability, you need a lot of different data sources. You need to transform and send that data out to any number of open source or commercial solutions. And you need like a lingua franca to be consistent, right? To say like, hey, every time I have a host or an IP address or any kind of metadata, right? Consistency is key. And that's what OpenTelemetry provides. It's everything that you need as a developer, as an operator, to instrument your system for observability. And it does that really through the power of the community working together to define those standards and
provide the components needed to extract that data from the hundreds of thousands of different combinations of software and hardware and infrastructure that people are using.
So it covers the gamut, so to speak. I mean, for example, from the user's perspective, they might be looking at different observability solutions, for example.
Yeah.
They might also be looking at different databases, different data sources.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so, can you please just kind of describe, though, how does that work from the user perspective?
It sort of depends on which part you're looking at. I think if we look at like the adoption cycle for users, right? Historically, they've looked for some kind of all-encompassing solution that at least covers a slice of their observability needs. So they'll look for, say, an infrastructure monitoring solution or an APM solution. And that would typically, each would have its own description of what a metric is, what a trace is, how data is the annotations on data, things like that, which made it challenging to deploy them because now you had an agent for each one with different capabilities and different ways of speaking. And then you also would have the actual solutions that your developers and operators would use every day, which wouldn't talk to each other. And so you'd get this sort of bifurcated view of what you've actually deployed, how it worked, and when you wanted to fix it, this caused a lot of challenges. I think today it's shifting to where companies are seeing OpenTelemetry. They go and roll that out. They use its collector agent, the language agents, other components to capture all of the data that they need from their infrastructure and applications. That data is all consistent, it's correlatable, they can customize it how they want. And now when they look at an observability solution, they're saying, hey, I want to send this data to you. What can you show me, right? What value do you give me? And OpenTelemetry also has the benefit of them being able to use multiple of those solutions at the same time. So if there's, say, a broad-ranging observability solution that solves a number of their needs, they can adopt that. But if they also want to do offline analytics or use a specific point solution, they can still proceed with that with the data that's coming out of OpenTelemetry.
It gives you a lot of optionality, right? As an organization that's bringing together an observability practice, or if you're trying to, in a lot of places you see sort of this start and stop, right? Where someone came in and we implemented observability this way, or we have this one logging solution, we have this one metric solution, or we maybe have multiple metric solutions based on which team you're on. Different things come in through acquisitions. I talked to someone earlier this week at KubeCon, And I was like, so let's talk about monitoring, right? And talk about observability. And he's like, I've got 7 or 8 or 9 different tools.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I see the same everywhere.
And that's most places. That's the norm, not the exception. And I think OpenTelemetry, the promise that we're starting to realize is that by having a project like this where there's really high alignment, really high trust between, a bunch of commercial competitors and also
open source solutions as well.
The open source solution, but coming together as an open source solution, what we've seen is great cooperation, right? Because this solves a problem for everyone, and crucially, it solves a lot more problems for end users.
Yes.
And how does that work from the user's perspective? I mean, with OpenTelemetry, they're trying to regroup these different observability platforms they want to use, for example, and they're getting good data, good metrics from several of them, likely.
Yep.
And they have their favorite
and logs and distributed traces and everything else.
Tracing,
yes.
et cetera. And so, on a user's perspective, with OpenTelemetry, how does that play out?
So you would set up OpenTelemetry, the collector agent to capture your infrastructure data, like that's typically your infrastructure metrics, your logs, and also to capture any data coming from the language-specific OpenTelemetry components that capture data from your applications. The collector's also capturing critical telemetry from sort of third-party prepackaged applications, typically databases, things like that. You now have this stream of consistent and coherent telemetry that's coming out of all of them. And to your question of what do I do next? You use exporters in OpenTelemetry to send that data where you want. You can send it to multiple destinations, as I mentioned before.
Okay.
And typically now you're used to doing that in the standard OpenTelemetry protocol, OTLP format. And it's literally, if you're using OTLP, like a couple lines of config, effectively, to send that data to whatever destination or destinations that you choose. It really improves the flexibility, right? Like if you're an end user, I mentioned the scenario where you want to use, say, like a broad-based observability solution, a point solution, very easy. Right, but also if you're maybe, I don't know, want to try out other vendors, try out new things, it is trivial is relative, it's extremely easy to start streaming that data to a new destination to go kick the tires and try it out.
Is the data, though, tagged? I mean, for example, this came from observability platform X. How does that work?
So typically it's going into an observability platform. Right? The data is coming out of your own applications, your own infrastructure, things like that, and you're sending it to a location.
So I want to bring up something, because this is a pretty common question you have, right? Like, what do I actually do with all this? And we have heard this in the community, and so we've spent the past 6 months or so working on a OpenTelemetry demo application.
Okay, right.
So that we actually just announced this week that's now 1.0. That's generally available. You can go to OpenTelemetry on GitHub. You can go to our website and read on the blog how to get started with it. And that shows you actually everything we just talked about. It shows you adding instrumentation to an application to get metrics and logs out of it and traces. It shows you getting infrastructure metrics and sending all that to open source projects like Prometheus and Jaeger, and then using tools like Grafana to actually create dashboards. We've also built in several scenarios that allow you to kind of create failures and then use the OpenTelemetry data to undercover what's actually going on, right? And we walk you through that through tutorials on the project. So it's a great way for people to get started. It takes 5 minutes to get up and running, and we've seen a lot of great uptake from commercial partners as well who have said, we'll use this to demo our platforms, right?
Exactly.
And again, using that OTLP and that sort of standard way of exporting data.
It's an easy way to demo different observability solutions, and as Leslie mentioned earlier, it's a great way also, where even if you're happy with your observability solution, it's a great way to start using OpenTelemetry to see examples of it used in practice on a relatively complex service or set of services.
Because you're aptly describing how it works, and you're answering my questions very well.
Thank you.
But I'm having to intellectualize and visualize it at the same time. So this demo, I think, is a way to build up that hands-on muscle memory, so to speak.
Precisely.
And how does that work? I mean, are you actually, where do you find it, too?
So again, you can find the demo at on the OpenTelemetry GitHub organization.
Yeah, great.
And you can get there from the OpenTelemetry.io site.
Yeah.
And what the demo actually is it's a working application. It's an e-commerce website.
It's like 11 different
services. 11 different services.
Different languages.
Right, every language that OpenTelemetry supports, minus Swift.
How many are there now?
So OpenTelemetry supports 12 languages, everything from Java, Go, PHP, Swift, .NET,
Ruby,
Erlang, Ruby, Rust,
Python.
Python.
Yes.
Don't forget Python.
Yeah. So we have a Python service in there, right? And it's a Python microservice that communicates over gRPC. This whole thing can be spun up in Kubernetes, and we've instrumented the entire thing. It's sort of a best practices guide, right? Because it's one of the hardest things when you're a developer and you hear about a new technology. You go to the docs and you get code snippets, but it's
they're tiny.
They're tiny, right?
Yeah.
You need something that says, how do I actually do this
we
for real?
Suffer from that, right? Like I've used like the JavaScript or Go SDKs, and they're great, but our documentation is actually fairly robust on some of these. But still, as Austin mentioned, it's not enough. So we have examples for our various SDKs or in our language libraries for, say, like Go or JavaScript or others that I've used, where we complement the documentation with examples. And this is prior to us building the demo.
I see.
And we have samples of things like, here's how you can trace a trivial gRPC interaction. But that's simple, right? There's a lot of complexity in real life when people are tracing real production services or capturing metrics or logs or what have you from them. What the demo shows is how to do that on a set of services and infrastructure that resemble what you would actually be using in production. So
it's not just a hello world
Exactly.
Yeah.
implementation of how to use it. You're actually looking at what it looks like in a real, often, for many, initially a chaotic situation.
I expect the demo to be the thing that probably the majority of developers who adopt OpenTelemetry end up using as a sample, like as a resource.
Yeah, and that was our goal when we were designing it, because we didn't just say like, okay, here's this very basic sort of interactions. We wanted something that was real. Yeah. And we wanted to show developers not only, hey, this is how you kind of set stuff up and you do that initialization, but here's how you actually add observability, and here's how you add context to the telemetry data that OpenTelemetry can provide you, so that you can help better represent your system, right? The business logic, the interesting things you want to ask questions about. We are trying to show you the guide on hey, here's how you actually build that, and that's really crucial for both adoption and also, I think, for helping everyone in the market understand this is where things are going. Just in the way that Kubernetes, again, was able to go out and sort of plant a flag and say, this is how we think things should be done. OpenTelemetry should be able to drive innovation in the monitoring sphere, both on the open source and the commercial side for many years to come, honestly.
Yes, especially with all the new functionality being added. Like we talked about the demo, and OpenTelemetry classically had tracing support. Metrics was added for application infrastructure metrics this year. Logs is being added now. But there's new things on the horizon.
Logs are available now at this time?
They're being worked on. It's usable in certain scenarios. Sort of classic text-based infrastructure logs. People are doing that in production. There's more to come. And in a different form, we can talk about more. But on the horizon is also profiling as a data type, so people can dive into how their code is actually performing in production down to individual function calls.
Oh, cool.
And we're also extending OpenTelemetry to capture data from client applications. So mobile apps, desktop apps, front-end web applications, so that, to Austin's point, those observability solutions can innovate by extending their observability from back-end services, back-end infrastructure running on a data center, running in the cloud, to the entire breadth of an application. So I can see, someone's using my mobile app to buy something, there was an error, and I can go see exactly, was that error in the app? Was it an internet connection? Was it in my back-end services? I can see the whole thing.
All the way to the edge.
All the way to the edge and into the databases and everything else. So you can get this full view, right? Actual, true, full observability into the breadth of the system, from clients to back-end services, and the depth all the way down from high-end service interactions, infrastructure interactions, down to individual function calls and parts of your code base. Think of what the various firms that absorb and consume OpenTelemetry data and the open source projects do, what they can do, what they'll be able to, the insights and innovations they can drive with this.
I'm sure that'll be appreciated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in the future, we'll be able to see more and more third-party or open source projects adopt OpenTelemetry themselves.
Yes.
Right? So Kubernetes, for example, has introduced OpenTelemetry tracing in the past 2 releases, and they continue to expand on that. So hopefully in the future, we'll see other open source projects, sort of infrastructure projects, adopt OpenTelemetry to bring in metrics, traces, all that.
They only had things to gain.
Right.
Exactly. I think Nginx was another recent one.
Nginx recently added OpenTelemetry support.
Where they're just streaming out metrics and other data to any of their users. And I think we're going to see more and more of this.
Yeah, it's really been amazing growth, and just in terms of how things have changed in the past year. Even a year ago, I was having to go explain OpenTelemetry to people, and now people are coming to me saying, "Okay, I've heard about this. I want to know more." Right? We're going all in on it.
We're seeing and Splunk probably has a slightly even more traditional customer base than Lightstep. And
a little bit.
I'm in customer meetings now, or prospect meetings, where they're saying, I've already adopted OpenTelemetry, right? I've either fully adopted it or I'm halfway through the adoption, and they're saying, assume that I have it, let me stream my data to you, right? And it makes it so easy both for them and us to have that conversation about how can you adopt our product or other products in the market, because OpenTelemetry lets you adopt any of them. And that's really how things have changed. Like a year ago, that conversation would have shocked me.
Yeah.
Because OpenTelemetry was still new, and it was still, was doing tracing, and metrics was on the way, and now we're seeing it everywhere. People are using it. You walk across the floor of this conference, you see OpenTelemetry observability mentioned everywhere. It's huge.
Everywhere you go, it's observability. And
that's been my experience. And
it's incredible.
But at the same time, it might be lost on some people. The difference for the user, maybe they don't really need to care that much about OpenTelemetry because it's transparent and it's set up for them, and they have.
The beauty is in the beginning of their adoption cycle, they don't have to care. OpenTelemetry is just as easy, if not easier, to set up than telemetry extraction solutions, agents, and SDKs they would have used in the past.
Yeah.
But the beauty of it is when they want to start decorating that data and customizing it with, say, custom business logic, custom business metrics, whether it's as simple as revenue per minute, right? Things we can't automatically infer, or to even more complicated things that they can do in post-processing. OpenTelemetry gives them the standard APIs and the flexibility to do that. And it makes it very easy, right? You don't have to have developers who are going to be worrying about how to write something in some proprietary vendor-specific SDK because they won't be familiar with it. With OpenTelemetry, if you're using Python, it's basically pip install OpenTelemetry, go use it. It's an API that you can rely on. Eventually, once it's, give it a few more years and it's a thing that people are used to using, that's going to be a thing that developers take across companies. It's going to be the standard thing they do when they want to create custom data. Right,
and,
you know how to use it.
And on a long enough time scale, it should be built in, right?
Agreed.
That's when we founded the project, our original vision statement was we want to make a high quality observability a built-in feature of cloud native software.
Yes.
So in 5 or 10 years, this should be something that is invisible to you, that it's a checkbox, that everything just kind of uses it, and it is able to introspect your code and sort of add all that important metadata, because that's how we've built our tools as observability first tools.
There's some already examples of this. I don't profess to be an expert on it, but I think Microsoft with .NET was building a lot of OTel functionality into the framework.
Yeah, there are languages like .NET where it's part of a framework. Rust is a great example of this. Erlang is a great example of this being added at sort of a framework level.
Yeah.
But the long-term vision is really observability as part of the development cycle, right? Moving stuff to the left, getting it into the, so much this is a day 2 problem. We want to make this a day 0 solution.
Yes.
And for the back-end developers and for the operations folks
for everyone,
as well.
Right? This fixes a lot of problems that have been around for a while.
Excellent. It's B. Cameron Gain signing off with Austin Parker, Head of Developer Relations from Lightstep, and Morgan McClean, Director of Product Management from Splunk. Thanks so much. I really found this fascinating.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. It was great.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.